Hello, everyone. You are very welcome to February's episode of A Wee Piece, the official Youth Link podcast. Today, I'm very fortunate to once again be joined by two members of Youth Link staff. This time, it is Paddy Norwood and Pearse Smith. Paddy, Pearse, thank you so much for joining us.
You're very welcome. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you for inviting us on.
Not a problem. We're happy to have you. And today we're just going to be having a pretty relaxed conversation, just a bit about your stories into youth work. How did you get into youth work here, and how has it shaped you in your career? And just specifically a bit about how did you come to Youth Link? So we'll go ahead and start with you, Paddy. Just tell us a bit about yourself and how did you get here today?
That's a very open question, I suppose, Dean. Yeah, there's quite. You will need to edit me a wee bit, and also do tell me to if I'm going off on tangents too. But how I got into youth work. Well, I'm nearly 35, so I suppose I should really go back to when I was a young person. I certainly always had the opportunity to go to youth clubs and church youth groups and things that actually often weren't my own church, so they're often friends inviting me, and there was great provision for youth clubs on Saturday nights or things to do on Sundays. Often went on weekends away and things like that, and I got the chance as well to go to Coromila every year, and that played a big part, and it was even part of the different summer weeks, and my mum would still be involved there. And so my experience as a young person would be one first reason, and then probably the support I need. My experience as a young person, looking back, has created some passions I have now. Second thing would be probably where I was at in my career. So I was 17 and I was in 6th year at school, and I got very ill, and I was in hospital for a substantial amount of time, and I didn't finish upper 6th, and then that was a real crossroads. So actually, to be honest, between the age of about 17 and 20, I was pretty clueless as to what I wanted to do. Like, I went to tech and things, but I just didn't know. And then I suppose I spoke to certain people. I was like, well, you've always loved being in youth work settings, so why don't you go down that road? And so volunteering was then an option. I suppose I went on a trip to Germany when I was 20 as well, through Coromila. And probably the style of learning, I just realised I'm very passionate about Northern Ireland. I didn't realise quite how passionate it was until I was put in a certain context. It was a very educational trip, and I was meeting students from, well, essentially all over the world, from different parts of Europe, America, and I was just talking about the history of our little place and their history, and I realised that I'm actually very passionate. So those elements were certainly important, and then I started volunteering when I was 21 just to get myself a little bit of experience in something, and also because I enjoyed doing it. So there was a little youth, I went on to Volunteer Now and just uploaded my details, and a youth club got in contact with me in East Belfast and says, do you fancy volunteering here? And I said yes, and I went along, and was completely outside my comfort zone, but actually got something from it. And then I also simultaneously was asked to start volunteering in our own parish of St Colmcille's, and really just one thing led to another. My weekly schedule was just made up of working with young people and volunteering, and I was like, do you know what, I actually love this. And then I thought, you know what, I could possibly do a degree one day in this, I don't know. I'd ruled out going to university at that stage, and then I was asked through that volunteering, I was asked to do a level 2 with some organisation called Youth Link. I did a level 2 with a bunch of different churches from East Belfast. So there was Jimbo and Anita were the tutors, and a couple of friends from St Colmcille's, and I knew a few others. We went along and completed that level 2, and then part of that, I went to an award ceremony, and then you think we had a big award ceremony every year back then, and then I was invited, heard about a thing called the Apprentice Programme, and was part of that for a year. Here in this, we used to have our lunch at this very table we're sitting on, and the room next door would meet up every week, and I was able to do a placement as part of that through an organisation called Serve, and I just got a really good experience that year. And then part of the Youth Link Youth Forum, where we actually made a music video, which was a pretty cool experience, and but it was just highlighting the needs of young people in Belfast, and we did an original song for it, and it was a great wee group we had as part of that. We did a couple other things with the Youth Forum as well, And then I around that time I applied for Ulster University, and through the experience I already had, I got in, and that was the start. That's how I got into this as a profession, and something changed where I became very demotivated in career, as a lot of young lads are. And then when you discover what you want to do, something the penny drops, and you work hard for it. So I suppose that was the start. Yeah, so that's a very long answer there, too.
No, it's a nice answer. I never actually knew that, Paddy. I never heard your journey into youth work, but like everyone I've talked to, it's never clean and tidy. Like, is it?
No, it's never. No.
This is the path that I want to do. So that was really nice hearing that, and I want to hear the music video definitely.
Yeah, I'll see if I can source it.
Well, I have to say, I don't think I've ever told you this, Paddy, but I have found that music video, and I have seen it.
Do you have a link?
I could find a link. Yeah,
can you put it in the description?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, a fresh face, Paddy.
Might make a wee resurgence. So yes, same to you, Pearse. You were mentioning there it's never clean and tidy. Tell us a bit about your journey into youth work.
Well,
How did you get
I was going to ask a question to Paddy. Like, was there a person when you were a young person? Was there a person or like a setting or something that just happened and you were like, this is class, this is it? Or I want to be him or her?
There certainly were a number. I think there was a number. I'd almost be too embarrassed to start naming names on a podcast. It's like people to hear it. But yeah, there definitely were. I suppose I should mention my parents, which is neither of them were like probably didn't even know what youth work was when I first started. But like, I think they always had that kind of. My dad was big into sports and loved the team environment and people, and he also did a lot of training. So like when he was in the bank, he would have led a lot of training, and so that mindset of developing and bettering people and working with people, I certainly got that links well to youth work. And also my mum had a career as working in healthcare as a physio, and like she worked in things like really difficult things like Marie Curie hospice and palliative care, but she always had this real love of the church and love of Carmela and just the cross community and cross community marriage and all that. So I do think there's something, my parents do have a big part in that, and there's a number of definite youth workers as well. Certainly when I was in some Calm Kills, I think Nolene, who we had a title of faith development worker, she just took upon herself to like, you know what, I'm gonna do make sure this parish provides for young people. She was a retired teacher. She's still there. She's really devoted to the parish, and I think like to have like us and a small group of volunteers to build the little things we did like a group and the commitment we put in, I think that was really hugely important. And then there was other people as well. I mean, certainly at university, like Mark and Susan there, I thought particularly were people like Pat Henry, like they were incredibly inspiring. And then people like I would say, and our trustees, I'm gonna mention Paul Brown, was the youth worker at Knock when I used to go there as a young person. So I always find him a good role model for a lot of myself and many of the young people that went. So yeah, there's a number there, Pearse. Yeah, sorry, I'm gonna.
No, it's just nice to hear. Same question to me, Dean.
Same question to you, and I'm interested to hear just asking that question if maybe there's any role models or people. In
yes,
your
I'm going to name
help.
names. I'll just name the first one just because it was I'm only 24. Like I'm still new into the game, and I've worked in couple of different youth organisations. Started when I was 17, but before that, I'll go back the same as Paddy did. When I was a young person, I didn't actually find youth work until pretty late. I think I was 14, and it was just me and a couple of my mates. I mean, I wasn't really doing much as a young person. I wasn't part of any sports, no real creative talents. I remember Jack Septiceye on YouTube used to have an upload schedule of 5 o'clock and 8 o'clock every day, and I made sure I watched every video at 5 o'clock and 8 o'clock every day on YouTube. So that's what I was like as a young person. And then when I was like 14 I think it was 14, there was just a park near us where we lived, and me and my mates would hang out there, not doing anything exciting, not getting any trouble or whatever. But there was this one man, Anthony Rogan. I'm going to shout him out. He was a good guy. He was doing some outreach there, and he got us involved, me and all my mates together. They had like a free gym for young people, and there was like a personal trainer in there. He'd help us, get introduced to fitness and things like that. And I was like, well, it's better than staying in the house. And at least my friends are going there as well. But that was really the start of it. Like, as soon as I got in there and I got to know him, he then introduced us to the other programs that the Colin Glen Youth had at the time, which was like a Friday night drop-in, and that was madness to me. It was the first time I walked into a place and disco lights were going, and then people were chatting, playing games, and it was mental. But I loved it. I really loved the opportunity of like meeting young people outside of the typical environment of like school or anything else that you'd have. Yeah, and I stuck around in Colin Glen Youth and met a number of people there who helped really bring me out of my shell. I was really quite a timid wee boy. But yeah, they just had many opportunities and cross-community opportunities. And through that program, I got involved in the T-Buck Uniting Communities Young Leaders program, which was an initiative between Colin Glen Youth and Eastside. Well, the area was Eastside. I can't remember the organisation. It started with Tides in East Belfast. I don't know if any of you guys know Tides. Yeah, so it was just, I think it was 15 of us between the ages of 14 and 16 from the Colin area, 15 from the East Side area. Got together some days out, did some training, and that program was really great because part of it was that it would help upskill us, get us some qualifications. At the time, I actually got a job in Colin Glen and working on the outdoor pursuits, and I was an outdoor pursuits instructor doing the sky check and the ropes and the climbing and the zip line and all that craziness. And I thought, here, this is a good opportunity for me to get actual qualifications in that, and I can stick doing that because I love doing it, you know. But then, as we did more of the sitting down and sharing a space with people from different communities, it was the first time I'd done any sort of cross-community stuff as a young person. I think I was 16. It was the first time that I'd met someone from a different background to me. And I thought I was a bit of a history buff. I was a nerd. So then I was like testing out all my, well, what about this time in history? And what about that time you guys did this? And, you know, when I was having these conversations with people from another community, I was unsatisfied with their answers. And I felt even more justified and maybe got a little bit more extreme in my views, which was totally not the purpose of the program. What it did make me notice was that I did have a lot of anger and a lot of justification inside me. So I actually stuck with the cross-community program, got some qualifications in youth leadership and community leadership, and started setting up some of the programs myself in different areas, and I was helped supported doing that with the Uniting Communities program. And then from that, I became Uniting Communities ambassador, and you know, just the youth work training got even more on the conflict resolution stuff, and I really started to be interested by that because I wasn't changing anyone's minds with what I was saying. I was just getting more and more hate-filled, if you will, or feeling more and more justified, which wasn't good. So I wanted to find a solution. How can I work out of that? Like, what's the actual avenue out? So I stuck with the Uniting Community stuff, and then as a young ambassador, Peace Players International were part of the program and delivering the training, and that was the first time I was introduced to Peace Players. And Debbie, who's been a big influence. Debbie works for YouthLink now. I actually started working in Peace Players because I had them training qualifications when I was 18 and stuck there throughout the entirety of uni and university. So I was a nice little part-time gig going out to schools and doing after-school programs of everyone from all types of communities. And I loved it. I loved getting into a setting where I wasn't getting worked up or get geared up and ready for a debate or anything like that, to changing it to how can I make this the most fun? How can I make young people want to come back? So I suppose shifting from a young person to actually working to coordinate events, shifting my own focus of like, this isn't an opportunity to try and retell the arguments that have been told for however many years and to keep the same narrative going, but how can I do something which is just a bit more joy? And I suppose having to do that, being put in that position, changed my attitudes as well. So yeah, youth work's been very good for me and like growing as a person, and now I'm very much interested in how to find peace and conflict resolution and reconciliation and things like that. And I've kind of stuck in that area with regards to youth work, and then thankfully I'm also doing that in some academic sense as well with Ulster University at the moment. So yeah, I think I went a wee bit off track there, but essentially, yeah, I really love the cross-community aspect of youth work. But as I spend more time in that area, there's so many different aspects to youth work that you come to learn and to deal with and grow through. You know, we start caring for young people in all aspects of them, not just of their community background or their views. And I find that to be a really enriching, empowering experience. And, you know, it forces you to, when you're in a position, especially, I don't know, being 18 and running cross-community events and programs, you're kind of forced in that position where you have to be a role model. So when you start living the role model, you know, 3 times a night, every week for a couple of weeks, you start bettering yourself as well. It just kind of happens naturally. So very grateful for being in that position, and I think it's helped me a lot. Personal growth, professional growth, and I'm not really hate anymore. Like, yeah, respecting humanity much more. And yeah.
Absolutely, and you touched on something there in your story, Pearse, that I think is really important about, sort of it highlights the importance of these cross-community programs, and kind of, especially like an organization like YouthLink that's very much about kind of bridging those divides. And I think it's often, it's easy to get this notion of like, we need to bring people to these cross-community programs because they're polarized on either side, and we need to show them that there's mutual ground. But often it's actually the case, as in your case and you experienced, it's often you kind of don't know what you believe and how you look at the other side of things. And it's often these cross-community programs where you have this sort of open space to put everything out. Like you said yourself, you were a bit of a history nerd, in your words, not mine. You were a bit of a history buff, and you were highlighting all these things that you had learned, and the stories and narratives that you had been told or found out about. But often we find, through these sort of, when we open the space for this cross-community discussion and even just have that sort of a level playing field, so to speak, you often find that there's a lot of wool we've pulled over our own eyes. I know we had our CEO Joe McKeown on the podcast last month, and he was talking about that very much as a part of his story, like going to training in youth work and it being delivered by like a Presbyterian minister and a Catholic nun, and kind of just realizing, hang on, like you said, what example is this setting here? Kind of when you are in a position to be a role model, it then shapes you and you become what you're trying to model to these young people. But that's amazing. I think it's also interesting. You touched on kind of, you got into youth work a bit late, around 14, but I think that's something that's interesting, is that youth work is something that does span across so many different ages, and obviously youth work with children who are maybe 5, 6, 7 is wildly different from what youth work would attract you when you were 14, 15, 16. And it's often, there's almost a tendency to think like, is it too late for youth work? So I just want to maybe just open the door to that discussion. Is it ever too late for youth work? Because obviously, when does youth work continue into? Because there's a great amount of formation and reconciliation that needs done with young adults, I find, as well. So kind of, what are your views on that?
Yeah, well, I suppose the classic, the cutoff they always say is officially 25. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I often found in a previous role, so before I came to Youth Link, and I was working in a role that was actually more geared towards adult support. I remember when I was trying to make referrals for things like housing, or even just like addiction support and things like that, there was a lot of services, and it was literally like, if they were 26, they were too old. And I think that was a real frustration for me. I also think, you're officially an adult at 18, but you're not mentally developed fully. You're not physically developed fully until a lot later. So I suppose there might come a point where you're maybe too late for youth work as we know it, but you're never really too late to be guided or to be supported or to listen to people that are a lot more mature and experienced in life. And you're never too old to learn. And I think that's one thing I enjoy about, I'm sort of in the middle of the road in terms of age of staff in the organisation, but like maybe some of our staff members that are a bit older than me, I won't appreciate me saying that. But like, I always one thing I really enjoy about them is they're talking about how much they're learning, constantly learning. So the learning that is involved in youth work, that you're never too old for that. In terms of actually getting involved, I mean, I suppose youth work, as Pearse says, you better yourself when you're in a youth work role. So I think to volunteer for that or to get involved, I don't think you're ever too late. Like, I've heard of through YouthLink, like people like in their 60s and 70s doing youth work, level 2 introduction to youth work. So actually only doing their first ever involvement as a volunteer past retirement age. So I suppose in that sense they're not too late.
Yeah. No, I totally, I think there's you might be, whenever you turn 16, you can't do a seniors program anymore, you're too old, or whatever the age might be in your youth club. But there's definitely a lot of learning and growth in them sort of leadership structures that a lot of youth centres would have, of like, okay, now you're a young volunteer and you're helping out with this group. And I think that's still the carry on of youth work, is having the worker there in charge, and then maybe the 18-year-old who's just in through the door volunteering, helping out. Definitely going to be so much growth in that young person there. When I joined the youth club at 14, when I was 15 and 16, just doors started opening left, right, and centre. I mean, I was very lucky to have some great youth workers who were very responsive to opportunities that they heard about, and would go up to you and say, "Here, are you interested in this?" So I remember it going into Colin Glen Youth one day, and then Anto Rogan turned around and was like, "Here, there's a Belgium trip. Do you want to go on it?" And I'm like, "What is it?" It's like, "Well, we're going to Belgium to learn about how Irish people fought together in the war not too long ago, and how they're like, they're commemorated together and fought together. It doesn't matter what community they were from, and it's a cross community trip with all these different groups." And I was like, "Oh, brilliant, that's class." And then another youth worker of mine, Colin, who I work with as well, he managed to open the door for me to get. He knew I was a bit of a political history guy, so he opened the door for me to get involved in the Northern Ireland's Commissioner for Children and Young People. And then once you say hello to someone, like, they're very, very. I think a lot of youth organisations are very good at trying to keep you involved and getting you involved. So loads of doors and opportunities open from there. And yeah, I think that if you go to youth work and say yes to a couple of opportunities, like, things just open up. I had no idea this is where I wanted to be. I had no plan to do the things that I have done, the places that I have been to. It's just when you're in there in the moment and you want to make the most out of it, doesn't matter what age you are, there's definitely opportunities available. And the great thing about youth work is that there's a bunch of people who want to help each other. So if you have the right youth workers, and they'll help you get to wherever it is you want to go, even if you don't know where you want to go and they don't know where you want to go, just things happen. And that's what I'm saying. It's quite messy. Like, there's all these different people that you meet and get inspired by and have opportunities with, and yeah, you just kind of go with the flow, I guess.
Yeah, and just on that, like, I think what you're saying there is so right, Pearse, and you were given like opportunities there, but it was up to you to take them, and it was up to you to put the effort into those opportunities. I think that's one of the great things about youth work as a concept, is like, you actually get out of it what you put in, probably more than anything. Like, and it does sometimes frustrate me that certain people involved might be like, "Well, I'm not getting everything out of this." It's like, well, what are you putting in? So I think saying yes to opportunities and the right opportunities is great, and then actually understanding that when it comes to a young person, like you can. It's such a cheesy saying, but you can take the horse to the trough, but you can't force it to drink. So it's a great saying, and I think sometimes there's limitations to what we can do as youth workers, but the right person gets the right opportunity, great things happen, but it has to be a two-way street.
That was one of the things that I really learned as a young person when I was talking about them examples of taking part in cross community work and having these discussions like, right, this is my time. I'm here because I'm from this background and I'm going to defend and represent my community well. But I learned very quickly, people are there for different reasons. People are there for different reasons. Some people are there to hang out with their friends. Maybe it's just to get out of the house. Maybe it's just, I don't know, some free pizza. And something as basic as that is like people doing different things or going to the same place but for different reasons. It was a very valuable learning thing for me, and I didn't understand that concept, which seems so basic, until I experienced it.
Yeah, some people, young people, say yes to any opportunity as long as there's pizza involved. So it's like, we're going to watch paint dry for an hour, but we're having pizza after. They're all for it, or McDonald's, So it's amazing how that actually just the basic needs sometimes are important too.
Yeah, absolutely. And there sometimes is a tendency to maybe overcomplicate things. Not that obviously there's a great deal of theory in youth work, and you think obviously we offer training for that. But sometimes there is a sort of tendency to overcomplicate things and to go in with a big, maybe, I mean, you're both more experienced in youth work than me, so stop me if I'm sprouting lies here. But there's maybe a tendency to go in just with too much of a plan and too much of a, this is what we're going to do and this is what the fruit's going to be of our labour and these are the goals we're going to meet. But actually, again, maybe it is also cliche, but every young person's different and every group of young people is different. And I'm sure maybe you can attest to this, like how generations of young people are different and the needs and challenges that young people are facing have changed and will continue to change. So sometimes it is better to just, start with the basics, like let's meet up for pizza and then let's talk.
Yeah, and I suppose as well, like, it's how you frame the story of the group, depending on who you talk to. Like, so if you're trying to promote a project to young people, like, you can't promote it using all this like jargon theory. But then if you're reporting the project to a funder, like, you have to remain honest. You have to remain true to what the project is and was, and how it met targets. But you can't just say, like, we had pizza and it was a bit of crack. You know, it was, so it's very and then how you reframe the story to each other can be different. So I think one thing youth workers are and should be are good communicators, and that sort of is adaptable depending on the context.
I wouldn't say it's overcomplicated. I always think it is nice to go in with a plan, but definitely you would have to have that plan after having worked with the young people before, or at least spoken to people who have worked with the young people before, because there's a lot of need out there, and a lot of need in different areas with young people, whether it be like drug and alcohol abuse, or maybe even just confidence or CV building, or end of violence against women and girls. All these different strategies, and there are different needs for different people. So I think it's totally fair enough to have a big grand scheme plan going in. Just, one of the key skills you need to have, and every youth worker can attest to this, is just being adaptable and really truly listening. So part of being a great communicator is listening and being aware and picking up on some things that you're seeing and noticing. And you could feel it, like if you're having a group discussion with young people, you can feel it whenever they're actually learning, or they're engaged in the process, or everyone's clued in the room of the discussion, and it is touching them in the way that reminds you, like, this is the work that we're doing and this is why we're doing it. But yeah, I totally understand the big scheme. So if this is the plan, we're going to do this. This is why we want money. Sometimes the actual learning and the valuable moments aren't planned at a learning outcome,
And I think, to get it right, you have to get the simple things right. And success is built on the simple things, right? And I often think the work itself isn't complicated, but it's so based upon relationships, relationships with young people, and sometimes relationship maybe with their family or workers. And relationships are complicated. So it's almost like sometimes we step on each other's toes, and that's what makes it complicated. But the actual, a lot of the work behind it actually isn't. Yeah.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, Pearse. And you said it said what I in a better way than I was trying to say it. But just it is like, it's the adaptability you need to have in youth work. That's kind of the sense I'm getting in my experience anyway, is you need to be adaptable. And obviously that's for small things, just on a small group level, adaptability within a session itself, but also just like the outlook of youth work as a whole, especially in Northern Ireland. Like, we're facing a lot of the same problems that maybe were being faced in youth work years ago. But there's also a lot more new problems that it's kind of trying to adapt to them while also still trying to address what youth work has always been addressing. So maybe we'll finish there. I'll just put a question to both of you. Maybe what is a way that youth work still needs to adapt, or maybe it's a way that it needs to adapt further to meet the needs of young people today? Because obviously, as you said, Pearse, there's a lot of needs, and they're very different, both in sort of topic, but also in severity. So just, I suppose just a very open question to you both. What are some ways that you think youth work, especially within the context of Northern Ireland, still needs to adapt and maybe evolve?
I'll go first. If I'm thinking of a utopia, ideal world, youth organisations wouldn't have to worry about funding. I mean, too many times that people who are great youth workers do not stay in the job because their contracts are 1 year to the next, and the pay isn't great. And not only are you a youth worker, but you're also a finance administrator and a reporter to funders, and there's just so many different skills that are packed into this title of youth work. I would love it if just a steady stream of money going into the centres, and then people can relax and focus on doing the work rather than focusing on the background context to try and make the work, to get the work set up. I think in the coming years, with peace money, this is the last round of peace funding from the European Union, I think that's going to be a big challenge to a lot of youth centres. And I think the ripple effects of that will be felt. If you try and imagine a world without the youth centres and the work that they're doing, particularly in Northern Ireland, it's not great. It's not a great way. I think issues are going to get worse. I think there's going to be a lot more hostility and deprivation, and we've done so much work to try and get to where we are now, which we're not in we're not in the perfect place, but I do think we're in a far better place than where we would be if there was no youth provision at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's a view shared by many, and including myself. I should have started that. It's your view, as if I was going to completely disagree with you, but no, it's 100%. No, you're absolutely right. And I think you mentioned about the funding administration. Like, a lot of those jobs are really tough and time consuming, and sometimes they're the hidden jobs that the hardest working people in the sector do a lot of hidden work that aren't seen, and that can be very draining. I think the question really, what needs to change or what could we do better. I think our relationship with other professionals is getting better, and it's got better. And the recognition as youth workers are professional is great. So like I'm noticing my interactions in recent years with teachers has been fantastic. Even like, you know, GPs, like getting in touch and things like that. But I do think that needs to really improve. I think there needs to be like counselors or teachers or any other professionals thinking, do you know what? We're not the best people to deal with it. We need to get the youth workers to deal with that. Because I think we're not as recognised as we could be in terms of like professional bodies and things like that. I also think youth work, like Pearse said, if all the centres and provisions were closed, you know, it'd be in a terrible place. Youth work's a mechanism for preventing a lot of things, and it's a great mechanism. And youth workers and youth work needs to make sure its own house is in order. And the next step is to gain recognition from those other key providers of support. And yeah, I think we're not doing a bad job, but we can always get better.
Absolutely, and hopefully Youth Link is a place where, at least in my role in communications, it's very much about trying to get the stories of youth work out there and really just make people known just the great work that is being done. And it's not something that should be, not something that can be, but also not something that should be easily overlooked. So no, that's brilliant. Look, thank you so much. That's unfortunately all the time we've got today, and that 30 minutes have flew in there. So very grateful for your time and for coming on the show and sharing some of your wisdom and experience. So I'd also like to thank everyone for listening. Another late upload for this month's episode, but we're gonna steady the ship here. You think eventually we'll start getting back to our earlier monthly uploads. But on behalf of everyone, I'd like to thank you very much for listening. We hope you've enjoyed it, and if you did enjoy it, why not give it a like? Why not share it around and spread it with someone who you think would maybe benefit from some of the things you heard today? So thank you very much, and we will see you in next month's episode.